started doing the show that, calm down everybody that's saying that Trump's making the economy do great because, the budget fiscal year runs through October. Um, I will say that in a small way, like if I were to take away all my political ideology and stuff like that, I would say that people don't necessarily respect us more around the world, but people are definitely a little bit more wary to cross us. They would it would seem that foreign governments and foreign nationals are far less likely to look at Americans as pushovers or as a place you can go. That being said, there's, a group of 7,000 unarmed, starving, poor people fleeing violence and poverty that are being looked at as a foreign army
Several
invading the United
thousand
States.
miles away. Uh,
Yes.
Also, just Courtney points out that they didn't. Congress wouldn't let Obama drive at full speed.
That, that is very true. It would seem that the entire time you had, the Mitch McConnells of the world just, throwing anything they could in the way of the train and adding as much weight to the caboose as they could to keep it from excelling because they knew that, inevitably Obama would have gotten the credit for it, and he still does. He has the credit for it. That will never go away. But,
I don't know, man. We're in this post-reality world,
you know,
and
it's true, but right before we even went live, I was just telling you I'm going through my constitution because one of the things we'll talk about is this ridiculous distraction attempt saying that through executive order the president can suspend naturalized citizen rights. But I'm going through it, and at the back of my constitution is the Declaration of Independence, and I'm reading all these things that our founding fathers said were reasons why we needed to cut the bands that united our governments. I mean, we're talking about things like obstructing the administration of justice by refusing assent to his laws, establishing judiciary powers, making judges dependent on his will alone for their tenure in office, refusing to pass laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, putting together, making, Mitch McConnell drawing out Senate sessions and things like that to make it for the sole purpose of fatiguing people into compliance, protecting his own cronies by mock trials and from punishment that they should have been put on. Specifically, this for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. I mean, we're talking about tariffs on every bit of Chinese imports, including our allies, imposing taxes on us without consent, depriving us in many cases, of benefits of a trial without jury. You can ask any African American in major cities across this country if they've been deprived of their trial by jury. He abdicated the government by declaring us out of his protection, waging war against half of America, the majority that voted for Democrats or for Hillary Clinton. They're enemies to Donald Trump. The press is enemies to Donald Trump,
so
his own citizens, of which he's supposed
what
to be protecting.
what I heard someone say today was that Trump is a he sees himself only as the president of the people who voted for him. Like you
Yeah,
literally
exactly.
do not matter
Oh, I mean,
if you didn't vote for him. And to them, he's great, right? So he is a great president under those. He's not the president for all people. This is all. It's all obviously divide and conquer, right?
mm-hmm.
But what I want to know is kind of working,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, look, he just
And
cited domestic insurrections, endeavored to prevent the populations of these states for the purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalizations of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. I mean, it was literally half of the things that we were pissed off at King George for and the British Crown for are all things that Donald Trump and his pseudo-fascist administration are trying to impose upon us.
but again, they like it, right?
But
And what does
but
it
the
say
they
about us?
the they is 1/3 of Americans who would vigorously still support this president, and but unfortunately
One
one
third
third
of
of us is
Americans
more
is
than half of
100
the
million
voters.
people, right?
Yeah,
So, and 63 million people voted for him. And it's not like he switched up when he became president. So we can say whatever we want and we can blame Trump, right? But Trump is just being Trump. Now, let's sort of try to get a little bit more specific. So there are three distinct lies recently that were told in the lead up to the midterms, and that's what these are, right? First, it was, oh, we're going to do a tax cut for the middle class on top of the one we gave to the big corporations. Mm-hmm. Congress is not in session. That's a lie, right? Then, okay, we're going to send troops to the border. Probably not. Maybe he will, but again, and then now today, oh, we're going to try to get rid of naturalized citizenship. And it's only going to be more and more until Tuesday of next week, right? So I guarantee you that there will be more outrageous and outlandish claims, whether they're even close to being true or not. Now, here's the other thing I want to ask. One could argue that all of these things are sort of breeding grounds, right? They're sort of beta tests, right? So if we, let's say, go after a group that really has no real representation, and we can basically sort of erase that category, let's say the transgender erasing that they want to do, right? And no one complains, then they got away with it. Then they'll move on to the next group that they can attack, right? So first is undocumented immigrants, right? Then it's what they want to do with the trans community. And now they're just openly saying we're deploying 5,000 troops right at the border. He's talking about military troops on U.S. soil, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so all of these things is like, oh, I can get away with this, I can get away with that, and now he's saying, look, by executive order, by fiat, I can just change the Constitution, right?
And he likes to say that they told him that. They say I have to do it,
and his people are just cheering him on. Why? Because he's owning the libtards. That is it. Anything that he does that will get liberals angry, they're all for it. Rights be damned until he comes for you.
Well, because to be fair, they think that that's exactly what happened to them under 8 years of Obama. You know, despite the fact that not a single one of these Trump supporters would have, in any way, shape, or form, allowed Obama to accomplish. If Obama said he was going to send more troops to the border than he actually did, because Obama and Bush did that. If he completely ignored Puerto Ricans, if, you know, he had called anywhere in the world a shithole country. I mean, if he had eaten the wrong lettuce, as we well know, they came after him. But one of the things about white nationalism as an ideology, as a political ideology, is, again, I reiterate, it's not just about hate. It's an organized effort of one people to eliminate another group of people and destroy both the social and political impact of that group as a whole on the society. And this always seems to go back to the Civil War. And during Reconstruction, it was a very similar time to now. Right after the Civil War, they're trying to rebuild the South, figure out how to readmit everybody back in. So they passed rules that said you can't use active federal troops within the borders of the United States, because that's what was happening in the South. They passed, you know, rules about habeas corpus because Lincoln suspended it, but they say that only in conditions of invasion or rebellion. That's why I would not be surprised if Donald Trump tried to say that this caravan of unarmed, starving women and children and old people is an invasion force. And the main point is that every time...
Funded by George Soros.
Yeah, of course, and the Middle Easterners and all the diseases they carry. That besides the fact that they have a legal right and have already claimed that they are coming to the border to go to a port of entry and legally apply for asylum. None of them are saying they're going to try to escape over the border, but still Trump puts 5,200...
They're also dissipated by half, and they're still over 1,000 miles out.
Yes, and...
This happened before, and it ended up in 14 arrests.
Yes.
So
the 5,200 troops that are being deployed and activated by the president, he's federalizing National Guard troops and sending actual troops there, are being set along the borders in California, Arizona, and Texas to act as like backup support for the Border Patrol, to build their mess halls and to build containment areas for people that they do capture. These so far the troops are not being utilized in any kind of a military fashion. Like, I would like to know if somebody would ask the president or the defense secretary or any of these people, is there an order to fire on the migrants if they try to enter the country? If they approach the port of entry, will they be fired upon? But like I was trying to say before, every time this country experiences a moment where a group of people that would, for all intents and purposes, be considered a minority, start gaining any sort of traction politically or socially or anything like that, they are threatened. In the 70s, you had thousands of bombings in Alabama and across the South that were bombing black churches and voter registration places and anywhere where they tried to register black voters. And the bombings didn't work, so they utilized the Jim Crow laws, and they utilized the intimidation and the fear and the terrorism to take away a political right. They said, okay, yeah, you have this right to do it, but if you come to this voting place, some random guy is going to detonate a bomb and kill all of your children and your wife and your family and blah, blah, blah. Is it really that important? Sure, you have the right to vote, but is it really that important? So now we're facing a very similar situation. We've just had a black president. You have activism really rampant amongst women and of the black community. And now you're seeing the backlash, or the white lash as it was once called, because these type of people, yes, indeed, want to prevent anybody from these minority positions from holding power, because anybody in power that feels threatened by losing it will go to extremes and will likely be paranoid about losing that power and thus do things in this extreme.
Okay.
They want to rewrite the rules of the game. And that is why you have this Cesar guy that shoots up a synagogue and straight up tells the police that all Jews need to die because they're committing genocide against white people.
Cesar Sayoc was the bomb guy.
Yeah, the bomb. Sorry, he was the bomb guy. He was coming after the Democrats on that one.
My segue.
You had a
segue?
segue?
You were talking about bombs in the 70s that didn't work. I was gonna say, speaking of bombs,
yeah, speaking of bombs. Well, yeah, and so someone like
it
Cesar.
Was so good.
I know. So you have someone like Cesar that's going to attempt the largest mass assassination attempt in political history. You've got a guy that shoots up a synagogue in Pittsburgh and kills people that survived the Holocaust and murders them dead because they were Jews. You've got, a guy that attempts to break into a black church, but the doors were locked, so he goes next door and shoots two random, black people that were just minding their own business at I think it was a convenience store. And these are the types of things that keep getting fed into, and that Donald Trump, by saying that there are good people on both sides, and by refusing to condemn white nationalism or racism in general, or hatred or bigotry, and simply saying that it's the media's fault for whipping this up, that it's all of his enemies' faults for stirring up all this anger, when he does not acknowledge or take any kind of responsibility for a single word that he has said, or a single hateful thing that he's inspired among all of these people who run around with Trump vans, who put commercials on TV that say a vote for any Democrat is a vote against America and will destroy us all, that say that, this caravan of people is full of Muslim terrorists carrying diseases from every country in the world, and they're coming to take your home and your jobs, and all these things are happening right before an election, and still the president does nothing. They even had Mike Pence have a Jews for Jesus pastor conduct a ceremony and pray for the Jews that were murdered by praying to Jesus the Messiah. And if you are a Jew and you think Jesus is the Messiah, then you are not a Jew. And that is what this administration put forward. They could have found any rabbi, but they chose a Jew for Jesus to give this sermon. And now he's in Pittsburgh against everybody's wishes, and he will do nothing to solve the problem.
Okay, so remember, you're supposed to be the Trump whisperer this week. But before that, we can have a couple of comments. So Courtney says he has created an atmosphere where violence is accepted as an option against those we disagree with. Foreign governments are doing whatever they wish because they have no fear of reprisal. He also points out the tan suit got Obama negative press. I'll do you one better. Remember when the cop arrested Obama's former professor in the early days of his presidency, and Obama was forced to sit down and have a beer with him, and the cop had this smug look on his face, like he was burdened to be there? That's what we did to Obama. Anyways, but Another comment from Courtney is it's not even about losing power. It's more about how you treated others while you were in power. If you were fair and just, there would be nothing to worry about. But if you were shitty towards people who lacked power, you would be nervous. Honestly, I think that I think Courtney's onto something there, right? And I think the reason people are so afraid of changing demographics or the browning of the country or just people being unapologetically black, right? Is because they think they know what they would do if they were treated the way they treat people, right? The way black people or people of color or migrants or whatever, if those people were treated that way, there would be no forgiveness or sit-ins. There would be a war, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so they are always afraid.
What the American Revolution was about.
Right. And this is what I'm saying. They're afraid that the same thing will happen to them because they have become the Mad Kings.
Yes, that's 100% true, and I really do believe it. You know, when you talk about things like, you know, the president trying to activate troops and send them to the border, and then you ask yourself, well, how many troops did he send to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria? You know, how many people's lives has he actually made better? And I can't think of any except for those people that were sitting on the sidelines the whole time Obama was president, just seething at the fact that someone that didn't look like them was in charge, despite the fact that their lives were not made any harder, that, you know, as a matter of fact, things became easier and more accessible. You know, I grew up, you know, I was, you know, 20 years old, 21 years old when the recession hit. I had only gotten a chance to vote for Obama this one time, and it was the only time I'd really ever gotten to vote, and I didn't get to really see everything that led up to it because I was so busy dealing with the fact that George Bush was in charge, and I was a, you know, young kid, and I was in the first 3 years of college, and I wanted to say my piece. But now we're living in a time where it doesn't really matter if you want to say your piece or not, because you don't care what someone else has to say. You just want to put your thing out there and then shut yourself off and say that the entire world should live the way I say that they should live. And that's the mentality behind Donald Trump. That's the mentality behind his supporters and the people that are running for office under his banner and saying that they're just like him. These are not people that are trying to do anything good for us, and no amount of rhetoric or pre-written hollow words of civility or bipartisanship can make me believe that there's going to be a change. I mean, someone like Donald Trump is 70 years old, is not going to change his tune because some Jewish people were murdered in Pittsburgh, or because people are dying from heroin in West Virginia, or a hurricane hits the Carolinas. He doesn't care about any of that. He wants to know how long will he be in charge, how much power he has and how much money he has, and how many people he can bend to his will. It's just like how he treats Chris Christie and stuff like that.
Never underestimate people's willingness to bend to power, right? Again, I keep saying this. We like to think as Americans we're super free thinkers and individuals, but a lot of us are really just sheep. And a lot of us actually just want to be told what to do or want to be told what we want to hear, right? We want to see the world as we'd like it to be as opposed to what it actually is. And so if someone tells me don't think too hard, I have simple answers, a lot of the times we'll go with that. If somebody's in power, we'll just say, hey, they're in power, they know what to do, right? And so don't underestimate people wanting another king, which is crazy to say, but what else? How else could you explain this?
So in that line, and I really like how you stated that, because it very well goes into the idea of voter suppression and voter purging and making sure that those people that you don't want to be in power don't even have the opportunity to do so. And we talked about it at length last week about the purges and the things like in Georgia and the Dakotas and Nevada, and in Texas. And specifically in Texas, the state authorities are saying that people that have been voting straight party line, Democrat, are having their votes switched after they cast their ballots, and they're saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it, it's a state's thing. And then the state comes in and says, well, there's nothing we can do about it, they probably just filled out their ballot too quickly, as if the speed at which you decide what you're voting for and doing is a problem.
All of this is this is all tests, and you'll see all the people that decried the Constitution and being a traditionalist and rule of law, they don't give a shit about that.
No.
Right? When it doesn't benefit them, you only cry rule of law when the law is there to protect you. Right? And as soon as things are looking like it's going to be a more fair playing field, or you feel like you don't have carte blanche reign of doing and saying whatever you want, then all of a sudden, these things are annoyances. But Courtney, yes, we are going to talk about Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed. But I'll close this part out just by saying that, if these bombings and the attempted bombings and the threat of bombings... I
want to ask you a question before we change the topics.
Okay, but if all of these bombings, threats are realized, and polling places are closed, and ballots are incorrectly printed, if voters are purged, and the sole power of government lied with one party saying that they were threatened by the other, who should also be jailed simply for opposing them, and that the press was the enemy.
Him up,
yes,
George Soros.
And that the press was the enemy. Patriotism is the only way to be proud. Militarize the border, fearing immigrants' arrival, allowing colonial or territorial citizens, such as those in Puerto Rico, to languish and suffer after natural disasters, while committing economic warfare with their allies, falling in love with our committed enemies, under a government controlling a majority of power while only representing a minority of citizens. Then what do we say about the state of our own democracy? And then how could anybody, a week from a midterm election, which is not a general election, but a midterm that is so very important, how could anybody not want to go out and vote? How could anybody not see the importance of preventing something like a fascist takeover in our country happen? I mean, this is exactly why Trump wants to say things like suspend the 14th Amendment.
I'll tell you why. Because Bernie got cheated. Yeah. And so you just got to stay home.
So what was the question you wanted to ask?
And also Jill Stein's not on the ballot. No, I was going to ask how directly or indirectly would you blame Trump for the actions of the synagogue murderer and the bomber, the Democratic bomber? It's
far easier to connect him to the Cesar bomber. It's much less easy to directly connect him, so I'd say he's indirectly responsible for things like the synagogue bombing. And I'm not saying that, he's Trump, so I blame him for everything that happens. I don't. But I blame him for making it easier for the person who pulled the trigger to believe that he could do it, that he was justified in doing it, and that he would be supported. Because now his name is on TV, his face is everywhere, people know him, and in the Trump radical circles, they look at him as a martyr. This type of person, this person who shot up a synagogue, is literally a mirror copy of these people in the Middle East and in other parts of the world that run into marketplaces and scream glory to God and blow themselves up. These people that are willing to take others down for the hope that they will be martyred and their name and their family will be taken care of. And maybe, they're not going to start a GoFundMe page for this guy. But, I mean, after Dylan Roof shot all those people in Charleston, and the people in the Parkland, they got letters talking about how these women that were in love with them and believed them and thought they were doing such good things, and they were praised for doing these things.
Let me ask you, people are terrible, right? But I want to ask you this. If we're going to, this is the other side's argument, which is, if you didn't blame Bernie Sanders for the baseball shooter, and you don't blame Obama for the Charleston shooter, why do you blame Trump for the synagogue shooter?
Because the only way to blame somebody, and this can go even if you want to put it in judicial perspective, the only way to blame someone is to set up a course of facts or a styling of evidence that can link that to something. Like, you can't just see the Representative Scalise being shot at a baseball game and say, oh, Bernie Sanders. There's no connections. There's no connecting the dots without going to, Six Sigmas, going way, way, way to the outliers and saying, something there. But when you have someone who there are thousands of documented records, tweets, videos, tapes, recordings, whether known or unknown, where this person has said things and used rhetoric that supports violence, where right here you've got a guy shooting up a synagogue and Trump is virtually silent. But if you bring up a Muslim that committed any crime, waterboard him until he tells you the truth. If you pick up a black kid, whether or not he's been charged with a crime, you just picked him up, you think he did something, rough him up a little bit on your way, putting him into the back of the police car. Nothing. There's nothing coming from the president's mouth about the synagogue shooter. There's no condemnation. Bernie Sanders condemned the police shooter.
Shooter should be put to death.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can say something like that. The synagogue shooter should be put to death, but you don't do anything to prevent it. You don't say anything, to all these, and to anybody else that might be thinking about doing this. I do not support you. Just a full-throated condemnation of this kind of action. You can say that anybody that shoots anybody or kills anybody should be given the death sentence. That's neither here nor there. That's just part of American history. We've done it plenty of times. Go to Texas. They have drive-thrus.
Since we're doing the Trump whisperer thing, some would argue that he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. Because even if he said, I wholeheartedly disavow this, and if you think you're doing this for me, don't, then the talk would have been, so what? You led to it, and we don't care about your crocodile tears now, right? So some would argue that no matter what he said, he wouldn't. There's no good way that would play for him. So it's better for him to say nothing. And then his people will point out that this dude said he doesn't think Trump is a nationalist. Trump is a globalist because he keeps too many Jews around him, because that's how sick this guy was. Now, they'll say if the crazy dude himself said he was no fan of Trump, and then so how can we say that Trump's words led to this?
I have to go back to establishing a course of evidence and consistency. I mean, if Donald Trump really truly condemned the action, then he wouldn't, within minutes of the press briefing and speech that Sarah Sanders and all his representatives have to mouth off and translate for him, pointing out the fact that he has Jews in his family, so of course he wouldn't want this to happen to anybody. But then he immediately goes back into the exact same rhetoric that people were, exactly. But people were telling him that your hate speech caused this, and then he says, "No, my hate speech didn't. The hate speech of other people caused this." And it just brings it right back to full circle by putting things out, by saying that CNN and these people are enemies and they're spouting lies. It's all fake news. He's not taking any modicum of responsibility. When when the baseball shooting happened, you can try and connect to Bernie Sanders all you want, but he still condemned it, and he said that this was not part of what he felt like. He never sent out a tweet that would refute any of that where he advocated for violence against any Republican. I don't remember the other one that you had asked me about, the Dylan Roof shooting. I mean, you can't blame Obama for that, because literally Dylan Roof was targeting people that looked like Obama. They were black people.
Exactly, Obama's fault. He was black.
That's a different kind of fault. That's blaming the victim. If the president was not black, would Dylan Roof have shot up a church? I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have. But I mean, that guy still shot up a church in Texas, and then died anyway. So he was willing to, and they were all white people.
Guy with a gun.
But the problem is that then you see the president go on and say that the Jews wouldn't have died if they had armed security.
That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
What in the hell would make any person who claims to be religious whatsoever think that having armed security at a church, at a place of worship where there is not supposed to be violence or weaponry, that's the reasonable response to them? And that's because him and people like him have taken millions from the NRA, and they believe that if you say anything bad about guns, even if it's about killing a bunch of Jews, then you are going to lose votes.
So here's the thing. I think that, I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is that you can't just blame the president.
No,
because
you can't.
He couldn't do this without support and people cheering him on.
Mm-hmm.
All these crazy things at the rallies that he says, people are cheering it on because that's
Yeah,
what
that
they
he'll
want to
pay
hear.
for legal
And
fees if
then,
somebody hurts
and then
what do you call it,
Fox
press.
News just parrots this. So, if anything, if you want to blame anyone for these shootings, maybe you got to look at Fox News. Maybe you have to look at all the people in the crowds. Maybe you have to look at places like Gab.
Yeah, where
Right?
you realize that you're going to be defended by someone. Any of these people who doesn't think anybody will support them is very unlikely to commit these kind of things. I mean, you got people like Timothy McVeigh that blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. These people that are distraught and clearly have mental instability or something like that. They were also, upon investigation, you find that they believed in white supremacy, in white nationalism, in nativism, where only people that look like me should be allowed to live in this country. And that is not what this country is about or is built on, but it certainly is what the history has been for 250 years. It has been about suppressing other people, holding other people away from their vote or from owning property, keep making them property. I mean, women have only been allowed to vote in the past 100 years, 105 years. Then you have a president that comes in and says that just by executive order, because the ominous and omnipotent and omnipresent they, said that all he needs is an executive order. And then you get Paul Ryan saying no. It's just not constitutional. You can't just write an executive order and suspend the Constitution.
Paul Ryan is still alive?
He is still kicking until they elect a new leader after the midterms.
Well,
So he is Speaker of the House for one more week.
I'll say this, and then I want to talk about the sort of bomber for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I will quote Mr. Gillum, the
mm-hmm.
governor, or hopefully soon to be governor of Florida, Andrew Gillum, where he said, "I'm not going to call him racist. Racists call him racist." Right? So all these people, we could say that Trump is not this and Trump is not doing that. But these people who are sending bombs to people, these people who are Proud Boys, all of these people, they believe in Trump. Right? So we can make whatever argument about Trump having Jewish people in his family. I don't think that holds water in the face of the climate that he plays to on a regular basis, and the coded and then recently not so coded language that he uses. Now, I do want to address one thing, right? Jay, our sometimes co-host, put up a post today on Facebook, or he shared a post about angry people. And he showed like people on the left screaming, and then tiki torch people screaming, as though they were one and the same. And I am not a believer in the both sides argument.
I agree.
Right? And I'll tell you why. There's one side that hates people because they are now getting a voice, because they are now being represented more, because they can no longer be oppressed in the ways that they used to, right? The other side hates that side because they hate them, right? There's a difference there. There's a difference between saying, oh, you're not allowing someone to eat in a restaurant, and then sending pipe bombs to people.
Mm-hmm. But,
right?
Well, Fox News and Republicans don't see it that way.
If I hate you because you hate me, that's very different than you hate me because I exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we can try to, because the new, Black Panther was the word before, right? And now, they're saying, oh, thugs at Antifa, right? Even Chris Cuomo is saying this. But at the end of the day, are you telling me that anyone, any normal human being, is going to let someone come on your lawn in your neighborhood carrying a torch, reminding people of things like the Nazis or the KKK, walking around saying you do not deserve to be alive, and just think that no one's supposed to say anything about that? We should just sit there and let them walk through our own streets? And if you say something back, somehow you're a thug?
You know, I do wonder why Rudy Giuliani has not asked Trump to denounce the radical white fundamentalist nationalism the same way that he asked Obama to denounce radical Islamists or whatever he wanted to say as the words fell out of his mouth. And he's been relatively quiet the past couple of weeks. One can only imagine why. This reminds me a little bit of the Dred Scott decision by the Supreme Court in 1857, right before the Civil War. Dred Scott, for anybody, I mean, probably has heard that name, but might not understand that that was where the Supreme Court decided that it was constitutional and legal to declare a black man as property who does not have citizenship rights and prevent even his children and descendants from having citizenship rights, regardless of whether he was a free citizen or not. And that was the Supreme Court 3 years before the Civil War happened. And then the Civil War did happen. There are parts of the Constitution, 15th Amendment, stating that previous conditions of servitude should not and cannot abridge the right to vote. That Section 4 of the 14th Amendment claims that any reparations basically from the defeated South are nullified. Any claims for damages from loss of property, including slaves, could not ever be sought by the victorious government that was reestablished during Reconstruction and after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
But there were Jim Crow laws that said if you were like the grandchild of a slave, they tried to not let you vote.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, specifically prohibited any state from abridging the right to vote. There's amendments that prevented them from establishing poll taxes or literacy tests, which is what the South tried to use to prevent black people from voting by saying you can't read, you can't vote. You can't pay the poll tax, you can't vote. And that is exactly what they did up until the early 1900s when women got the right to vote, and things changed a little bit then. You know, we can go back through any history book that hasn't been tainted by the Board of Education of Texas and find that there are thousands of examples throughout our history when we have committed a wrong against a group of people and then sometime later found a way to right that wrong. As of right now, we're not doing that. Again, we're recycling because we're going back to the things that we've already righted and re-wronging them again.
Re-wronging them
yes.
again.
That's exactly what we're doing. We are re-wronging things.
But my point is the outrage is not the same. And I do want to, and I've been guilty of this myself, but just like thinking about it more, the idea that social justice warrior is like a negative connotation is a little perverse to me. Because as a social justice warrior, what are you saying? You're saying that other people matter, right? And to stomp on that is to say that people who are historically disenfranchised for whatever reason, they should just lighten up and allow the people who have run things to continue to run things and keep things the same. So if speaking up collectively to give the voiceless a voice makes you an SJW, and that's a bad thing, I think it says more about you if you think it's a bad thing.
I mean, I'm not going to say it started with Obama, but that type of rhetoric condemning someone that was trying to do good for the people, when Republicans started finding secret ways to hate Obama because he was black, but not actually saying things like, you know, oh, he's just a community organizer. He was just a community organizer. A person who was getting people registered to vote and for promoting his community and for doing better by the people that he wanted to represent. That made him wrong.
We have a game show host for a president, so whatever, right?
I hate being reminded of that. Yeah, there are 143 now. 145 in recent days. 145 terrorist attacks committed in America this year alone, October 30th. All of them have been white, and a great majority of them with whom investigations have been done and political ideologies or motivations can be inferred were far-right extremists. They were people who believed in the ideology of fascism or Nazism. And you have people in the Trump administration that try to say things like, "Oh, well, I believe in far right ideologies and stuff like that." We have like Ryan Zinke in the Interior Department, who's under investigation right now, saying, "Oh, they're just really far right." Well, how far right until you hit a wall and you declare what you actually are? Because the farthest right you can go, from what I understand about politics and ideology, is fascism, is absolute dictatorship. And that's exactly.
Say you could go far white.
And the NPR had released a poll today, and I forget who conducted the poll, and it's been something that's been going on since the early '90s, about asking Americans, and specifically the changes now in millennials, but asking them how they feel about the importance of living in a democracy, or how they would feel about the military running the government, and if that's a good thing, or if we had a leader that could act without approval from Congress or notification. And 32% of respondents supported those types of things. So you can draw a little conclusion, an inference, if you will, that if 32% of people agree with that, and about 33% of people are very strong Trump supporters, then you can see where we're going with this. That even though this is 1/3 is a minority, they hold a majority of power. The people that are like-minded, like these people who aren't as outspoken, are our police officers. They are elected officials. They are department heads and chiefs and firemen and EMTs. And you never know when that person's bigotry or hatred is going to come out through their work. Whether or not it's like an episode of Grey's Anatomy and you have to decide whether or not to be a doctor and operate on a Nazi and you're Jewish, or vice versa, where you have a doctor that can say that they hate Jews or black people and refuse to operate on them. And I'm not saying that kind of stuff happens, but I'm saying that the rhetoric that comes out of the Trump administration, the people that support him, continues to roll the ball in that direction and let people think that it's okay to behave that way, that it's okay to not like someone because they're an immigrant, or because they are a minority, or they talk differently than you, or they dress differently, or they eat different food, or they speak a different language. And all of this is nothing's being done to stop it from the side that it's coming from. Plenty is being done from the left. Plenty is being done by Democrats and liberals and progressives and all these other people that oppose the Trump administration. But without power, without legislative power, nothing can be done. And a week before an election, this is the time to get things done. State legislatures are up. Senators are up. A third of Congress is up.
Yeah, but now prediction time. Because I do want to wrap this up soon.
Of course. Well, what is this, Christmas? You got a bow for me?
How do you think next Tuesday turns out?
Well, next Tuesday, I really hope that we have a good show that can. Hopefully, we'll be able to start a little earlier. I know that the schedules are different, but polls close at 8:00. So I'd like to be able to review these things. But if we're going to put in a little prediction mode right now that we can hold ourselves to next week, I'm going to go with my heart and say that the Democrats will take the House.
Okay.
I have this odd feeling that we will flip one Senate seat and be a 50-50 deadlock with Mike Pence casting the final votes for things. I do not know the rules in the Senate.
Will that Senate seat be Beto O'Rourke?
I think that if you get Beto O'Rourke, then you lose Bob Menendez.
Why? Two completely separate races.
They are very separate races, but if you look at them a little bit side by side, you can see that, when you have like Bob Menendez and Bob Hugin running for Senate in New Jersey, it's a very tight race and it's very inflammatory and very angry, and it would be the first time that a Republican in 50 years has taken the Senate seat in New Jersey, and the first time in 50 years that a Democrat would be taking a Senate seat in Texas.
But just for the case of symmetry, you can't say that you're going to lose Bob Menendez.
No, I'm just saying that it's a stronger chance that Bob Menendez will lose as the incumbent, just as it is a strong chance that Senator Cruz would lose as the incumbent, coming from the other side, mounting a very strong and well-funded campaign. I mean, Hugin has outraised Menendez, and O'Rourke has outraised Cruz. I think that it's a possibility that they just flip around and you get Cory Booker and Hugin here, and you get, I don't even know the other guy from Texas.
Let me ask you a question. You just got a Democratic governor, right?
Where? Oh, in New Jersey? Yeah.
So if that guy won by, and it wasn't close, was it?
It was not particularly close, but it was also
So
pretty low turnout.
Then why don't you think that Menendez will hold his seat?
Because
Obviously there's a lot of
there was a
Democratic,
huge difference. And Kim Guadagno was the lieutenant governor to one of the most unpopular people in American politics, which is Chris Christie. So she already started 50 yards behind. You know, Phil Murphy is a uber billionaire who's been working in government, was appointed by Barack Obama to be ambassador to Germany. He already had a head start in that he was a Democrat, that he had tons of money and could fund as much stuff as he wanted, just like Bob Hugin has tons of money from his own pocket. He put $32 million into his campaign to smear Bob Menendez, you know, saying that he's dealt with underage prostitutes and, you know, convicted of all this stuff when almost none of it is true, and it's all very exaggerated. Yeah. I mean, and I want to clarify something about the Mueller investigation once we're done here. But you know, when you see that effort that was being made, of course, Phil Murphy was going to win in New Jersey. I mean, it was almost not even a surprise. And towards the end, Kim got all crazy with the MS-13 and the gangsters and stuff like that. So Bob Menendez has been in for a long time. He is a pariah in the Democratic Party. He was censured for his dealings with an optometrist named Melgen, who went to jail for federal crimes. And you got Ted Cruz, who's just this reek. He's just
come on.
I can't even really describe Ted Cruz without just sulking, because he's just a horrible person.
I thought you were going to say without throwing up in your mouth. Okay, next question, because I do want us to move. Andrew Gillum, Stacey Abrams. You think
I would love? I gave $5 to Gillum, but I think that Rick Scott played a really good card, leaving office and going to run for Senate, because he still gets to promote through the governor's office the party line, while also running for Senate in a state that is somewhat purple but pretty strongly Republican when it comes to certain things. I think that that Florida will stay red.
Those polls are very close, though, right?
They are, but you know how I feel about polls, not the people, the POLLS.
Okay.
And the thing I wanted to clarify about Robert Mueller is there's a lot of fire on Twitter right now saying, you know, Robert Mueller under investigation for sexual misconduct or something like that. That is not true. The actual spokesman for the Justice Department clarified, and of course everybody's ignoring it because Republicans and Trump publicans want to run with it. They are investigating a claim that women were being paid to make false allegations against Robert Mueller, and they are now investigating those claims.
That's the thing that I wanted to bring up. So basically, because this is Robert Mueller investigating this, right? So he requested the FBI.
It's his team, but Robert Mueller himself is not physically investigating.
He's not investigating, but I'm saying he requested the FBI investigate this. And does this not seem like some Trump person that tried to...
Oh, absolutely.
And if that leads back to them, that's your obstruction of justice right there.
Man, if we could find the fingerprints on that one, I mean, my God, that would be one of those things that, like, the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Trump's people are pretty stupid, and they get caught all the time.
You know, I don't want to say that Trump people are pretty stupid and they don't care.
I'm not talking about his voters. I mean, we could talk about that. I'm saying his swamp.
And they're not stupid either. I mean, they got to where they got because they had some kind of savvy. I mean, Gerald Ford was considered an absolute idiot. That he was dumber than a $2 bill in his barn.
Kiss up to the right person.
Exactly, but I think that there's a lot of them that understand that their position and their power is conditional upon Donald Trump staying in power, and that's always how anybody feels in those situations. It's why you mentioned things like the Obama bubble bath. You know, where everybody got very comfortable in the Obama administration, not realizing that you're only president for 2 terms and that all these people are circling you, waiting for a weakness to arise. And they found it, and they exploited it even more when Hillary Clinton took the nomination. I'm not going to say stole or won, but I'm going to say took the nomination for the Democratic ticket. So that is, I think, where we lie on that one. Okay. I am not a fan of where we are right now, but I do know in 1 week I took off from work, and I'm going to bother all of my friends on Facebook and in my phone directory and make sure they go out to vote.
I want to say this. Right now, whoever's listening and whoever listens to this later, don't just go vote so you can shame your friends that they didn't vote. Bring them with you.
Yes, yes.
Bring them with you. Go have a beer afterwards. Whatever you do.
I wish we had the number. I don't. Can you? My computer's really slow. Is there any way you can do a quick search for the phone number for access to polls, or if you need a ride to the polls? Okay. Hell, if anybody needs a ride to the polls and you live near me, within 20 minutes driving, I'll drive you to the polls. I volunteered the past 2 elections to do that, to volunteer, to drive people to the polls, and to get people their mail-in ballots, to get people their absentee ballots. I've registered dozens and dozens of people to vote. It's so important, and it really makes a difference. It might not be as big of a difference as it would for president, since that's the Electoral College, but when we're talking about straight up majority rules voting, every single vote counts. Bernie Sanders won the mayor of Burlington by 10 votes. A woman who almost unseated a Republican in the House of Representatives in Virginia tied because they threw out 2 votes, and then they flipped a coin to see who won this seat. So if one more person had voted in Virginia, Virginia would be a blue state and not a red one. One single person out of the millions of people that live in that state could have changed the entire future of that state. So why do you think that you can't change anything? If you're listening right now, if you know anybody that's even on the fence, doesn't think they should vote, if you know a libertarian who says that I don't vote because I don't believe in picking someone else's master,
and then tell them to go vote.
Do not punch them in the face. The only people that it's okay to punch in the face are Nazis. And I will never change my mind. I don't care what you say.
If you don't vote, you're a Nazi. I said it.
Even Nazis vote, though. And Nazis will be voting. Keep that in mind. Nazis absolutely will be voting.
Yeah,
white supremacists will be voting.
If you don't vote, you're voting with the Nazis or for the Nazis.
Well, if you don't vote, you're taking away any bit of defense we have against Nazis and fascists and people like that. You know, we've had Democrats as president for 8-year terms, you know, between Clinton and Obama, and we have not devolved into a socialist empire where everything is controlled and owned by the state. As a matter of fact, every time Democrats are in charge,
back into a monarchy, won't we?
Every time the Democrats have been in charge, the economy has boomed, jobs have been up, social anxiety has been down, consumer confidence has been up. That has not been the case in the past 3 Republican terms in office.
In any event. Megyn Kelly, blackface. What do you think about that?
I think that it's entirely impossible that she, as a news reporter, as a white woman, as someone who worked for Fox, and as someone who has been around the gamut a couple of times, did not know what blackface was or how it could be interpreted by anybody in the black community. I don't believe for one second she didn't know that. Her apology was very scripty, as if you were Mom from Futurama trying to speak to your beloved people. I'm glad that it wasn't very well received, because I don't think it was very well sent. And I think that she was very ignorant in what she said, despite the fact that she's a good person in all these other respects. If you're going to say that a man should be held accountable for sexual harassment claims, you know, where he hovered his hands over her chest, and there's a picture, and I'm talking about Al Franken here. If you're saying that that kind of person should be held accountable for what they did and what they said, if what's-her-face, Paula Deen, can get in trouble for using the N-word, and any of these other people for just a slip of the tongue.
Paula Deen deserved that shit.
Yeah, so if you can, if you want to hold other people accountable for what they say, and as someone in the media, as Megyn Kelly is, that's one of the, you know, star goals of a journalist, is to hold people accountable.
Prosecutor.
Then she needs to be held accountable for something that she said, and she deserves to be punished. You know, I'm not talking about a lashing or anything like that, but, you know, maybe you don't get as many sponsorships this time around, or maybe you don't get that promotion or a new job, or maybe you have to sit out the news cycle for a couple months until
$69 million for doing nothing on a show that was failing anyway. NBC didn't get rid of her because she said she didn't care about blackface. NBC got rid of her because her ratings were down. And they got a lot of backlash for hiring her in the first place. So they can pretend they were taking a moral stand, but they weren't.
Well,
and they knew who they hired.
Well, they hired the woman, I hope I'm not incorrect here, that pulled the plug on Roger Ailes' sexual harassment and things like that, and that's why she was let go from Fox, because that's how they were. And you saw how Donald Trump treated her.
Remember the 8 years before that.
Yeah, I know.
This is like the pre-Laura Ingraham.
Yeah. And Laura Ingraham, who still has her show after saying some of the things that she said, you know, with regards to Parkland and such. I mean, those are the type of people that I think should really be punished. Megyn Kelly, poo-poo on you. That was a stupid thing to say, stupid thing to do. Your apology was weak, but
and they wanted to fire you anyway, and this was just
exactly.
An excuse.
You just need it's just kind of the excuse for firing Roseanne. It's Roseanne all over again.
No. Roseanne deserved to get fired.
Yes, she deserved to get fired, and I hope she burns in hell.
I agree. Now, what else do you have? I got some comments here because I do want to end on a note that all of this, and CNN and MSNBC and all of these guys are complicit in the rise of Trump and the tearing apart of the nation because it's all WWF.
Oh, it very much is.
So go ahead. That's what I want to close with.
Well, do you have anything that you didn't get to say that you wanted to say?
We got Megyn Kelly. We talked about the bombers. We talked about the whole both sides is bullshit. I brought up saying SJW as a negative term is pretty disgusting when you actually think about it. I'm good. I think I'm good. And my predictions.
Oh yeah, we didn't.
I think
your predictions.
O'Rourke loses. I think Gillum wins. I think Stacey Abrams loses because they're gonna cheat. They're already cheating now, and switching votes and throwing away ballots and all of that.
What do you think about Jersey and Georgia? I mean, if you don't have enough information to make a
Georgia is Stacey Abrams. That's what I'm saying. I think she's gonna lose.
Oh no. So
the governor.
Yeah, but no, isn't Brian Kemp the one that's running? You think that Stacey? Oh, I'm sorry. She's the Democrat.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was confusing her for something else. So you think that Brian Kemp is going to win in Georgia?
Okay. Because he's already cheating and unregistering people.
Yes, and that is why I said before that I thought she was going to lose. And I don't know why I just had a brain fart there.
I think that Gillum will win.
Really?
And what I like about Gillum is he's unapologetically black. He just says it in a way that Obama never could. Well, I appreciate that.
I mean, I'd like to have the stats in front of me about the population of Florida that is African American.
But it's not just that. There's enough people that hate Trump, and this guy Ron DeSantis has hitched his train, or hitched his wagon to Trump's train. And so the question is, how many people in Florida? And remember, a lot of people from Puerto Rico migrated over to Florida, and they have the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
as long as they're residents of Florida, if they're still residents of Puerto Rico, they don't.
Yeah, that storm was a year ago. Courtney thinks she's gonna win. I hope she does.
Listen, I hope she pulls a Doug Jones out of her ass, and not literally, but I certainly hope that she does because Georgia needs a little bit of blue time to reconcile 50 years.
At the very least, to get voting back in order because they're literally cheating over there. But I think Andrew Gillum wins. I think, unfortunately, as much as I want to see Ted Cruz lose, I think Beto O'Rourke's going to lose.
Oh, I mean, when you've got literally the voting machines switching votes to Ted Cruz, you have a pretty good chance. I mean, like, how much more of a handicap can you have in an election and then not do anything about it?
And now here's my prediction here, and I hope that I'm wrong. I seriously hope that I'm wrong. I think that the Democrats, they're going to narrowly, if not still lose the House. Narrowly win, if not still lose. I don't think they're going to. If they get the House, it'll be like by 1 or 2 seats.
That's all you need.
And the Senate, there's no chance in hell they're getting that. And even if it's 50-50, there's still Mike Pence.
I know.
So that means they don't have it.
Got to find a way to keep Mike Pence out of town when there's a vote.
Yeah, Courtney says Cruz will win, unfortunately. So those are my predictions. I think Gillum wins, Abrams loses, O'Rourke loses. We may not take the House in a huge upset. And we're definitely not taking the Senate. And here's another big one. I think, spoiler alert, Robert Mueller's investigation will bring more people down, but it won't bring Trump down.
Do you think that there's gonna be a bombshell out on Monday?
Oh, the October.
So the last minute or so of our show, do you think that there will be something crazy that will happen on Monday that
I
will
think
affect
there
voter
may
turnout.
literally be a bombshell.
Yeah.
Or I know Trump is going to say something crazy. If you think the whole birthright citizenship was a big deal,
It's like, I'm abolishing
it
taxes.
is going to get worse with the crazy things that he says. And no, I don't think there's any big news that's going to come out on Tuesday that will hurt Trump or Trump's base. I don't think so. So we'll see. And I hope I'm wrong.
It'd be nice if Ryan Zinke resigned right as that was happening. It'd be nice if anybody resigned, because if you create an opening in any part here and Democrats take the Senate, then boom, advise and consent becomes very important.
Yeah, well, not gonna happen. All right. So in closing, I just wanted to a comment that LeVar made about this all being WWF, and the news networks are in on it, right? Because if you are an honest broker of information, like, you can be incensed that Trump said some crazy thing or lied because he's a fucking liar. But when you keep bringing people on to support that, people that are coming on there spewing, that are mouthpieces or cudgels for Trump, and people that you know are just going to parrot the falsehoods that he claims and distort everything, you're just there to play a referee in a WWF match. And each side just is playing to the crowd. And you're not actually reporting the news, because you know when you can put the headline on your YouTube channel that says Paris Denard gets destroyed by Phil Mudd, then that's just going to drive clicks. And that's what this is all about. And so I think secretly CNN loves Trump. Because it's become a business model for them to call out his lies. And if they really cared about, like, journalism, they wouldn't have people arguing every segment. They would that they know are going to be dishonest. They would have people actually report the news and have discussions about it, instead of everything devolving into a shouting match. You would think that they didn't pay these people to come back every week, to come on there, and then they get to, like, oh, now you're lying again. You hired them. But anyway.
Well, you have to present somebody that actually believes in the other side as your.
But you know that they don't really believe.
I mean, that's why they have that one guy on the 5 that they always ignore. And, you know, you've got Shep Smith on Fox.
I like Shep Smith.
I like him. Shep's a good kid. So, in closing, as we've been trying to do for the past couple minutes, and we should keep going, get out and vote. Tell people to vote. Text them. Call them. Bring them with you when you vote. Walking up and down the streets outside the building where you vote, and tell people to go vote. Just don't campaign for anybody within 100 yards of an entrance. It doesn't matter. I mean, well, it does matter if you're going to vote for Mickey Mouse, but it doesn't matter if you're going to vote Democrat or Republican. It really matters that you go out and vote and show that there is a desire to exercise that right, and that it is cherished by us, and that a majority of us want to keep it that way, and want to keep still being able to pick our leaders and not have a dictator in charge, and not have somebody who thinks they can suspend parts of the Constitution on executive order, you know, which would then also be able to suspend term limits on the president and his appointment powers and such things like that. So if you believe in fascism, then by all means, please stay home or go vote party line Republican.
Yes, and if you don't vote, don't complain.
And if you don't vote, don't complain. I wish that there was something on Facebook that wouldn't allow you to post political comments unless you show that you voted or something. And I don't really mean that, but, you know, that would be nice if there was some clarification of people complaining about anything they dislike about government or the way things are, but also to show, did you vote? Or did you vote for the person that believed the same things as you?
Blockchain. Well,
yeah.
Vote from your phone.
And then that all of a sudden an EMP wave is going to come from the sun, and we're all going to not be able to vote, and Trump will be like, oh, I'm president for life now.
That's going to happen anyway.
All right, so Steve, where are they going to find
you can find me this Sunday on our weekly Walking Dead show on The Reel After the Credits. We will be celebrating Rick Grimes in his final episode on The Walking Dead.
Does that mean he's dying?
Is he going to die? Or is he going to fly off in that helicopter? Who knows? Also, you can find me on The Reel proper on Mondays. Prime time. We did it yesterday. We'll do it next Monday.
Indeed.
On in perpetuity. And you can find me on your favorite social media network as long as it's not Snapchat.
Damn, I was hoping it'd be Snapchat this time.
A.M. Johnson.
Well, you can find me in St. Louis, where there are dubs of which need to be rolled upon. And also best to contact me through Facebook, as many of you have, and I really appreciate your messages and your comments and the little memes and things that you send me and forward to me. So
Except
thank you.
for the pipe bombs.
Yeah, please do not forward me any pipe bombs. Thank you so much. So very much appreciate y'all tuning in 1 week before the midterms. Please tune in next week. Tell your friends to watch with you. I'm sure that
after
the other,
you vote.
Yeah, after you vote, of course, because we're going to go on after 8 o'clock just to be sure. And you know, even if you are stuck watching Fox or CNN or MSNBC or something like that as your post-election coverage, keep us on in the background too, because they won't listen to you, but we will. And we actually appreciate you. They just want your money from advertising dollars.
But we want your money too.
But we'll get to that in a later time.
Okay.
So thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember to go out and vote. Remember that you are what makes a democracy a democracy. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Drugs, not drugs.
Sometimes drugs.